Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our third installment of the Industry Future Challenge 2023. My name is Ravi Dindayal, your host for today and CXO at Prepr. As you know, as part of our mission at Prepr is to educate, innovate, and collaborate. Our sponsors, the National Research Council, Magnet, and Linux, have entrusted us to deliver this very important program in order to be a catalyst of change and innovation in Canada. So, how does this work? Basically, this program is brought to you, like I said, by Prepr. It explores the intersection of disruptive technologies and their impact on key industries. And the goal, again, is to fuel Canadian innovation, highlight talent, and bring solvers together to create positive change. So step one is what we're doing today, basically having our panel of experts on hospitality discuss and explore the topic. And from this discussion, identify a challenge or a statement or an idea that's coming out of the conversation that should be explored further. And then opening that up for teams to pitch in a competition where we have prizes up to a $500 Visa gift card and many more types of prizes to encourage teams to collaborate and join in on the challenge. So, the future of hospitality. Why this topic? Well, the sharing economy, as we know, really got on the map in 2008, I would say, with Airbnb, bless you, whoever sneezed. With Airbnb and Uber, I think it really kicked off. But peer-to-peer sharing, has been around for a while. But definitely, I think things really kicked off around that period, same time as Facebook. And in really researching this topic, I found that it's really about the millennials, the new generation. I'm Gen X, but I think for us, it was a bit different. But millennials have sort of grown up with the sharing economy, and I feel as a marketer and doing my research on different segments like millennials, and we as marketers we like to put labels on our personas, as we call them. But I feel that this new millennial generation, the future generations, really care more about happiness, health, and their reputation versus what they own. Less is more for this generation. And this has now become a way of life for how they live, and I think in the future. So that's really what we want to explore in today's session. It's how's a relationship between traditional hospitality and sharing platforms evolved since 2008. Looking at, obviously, the government has played a big part in sharing platforms like Uber. Lots of news stories, Airbnb. Recently in Australia and New York, regulations have affected these sharing platforms, and just looking at how these disruptions are going to affect it in the future and what the future of the sharing economy looks like. So to help us understand this and unpack it is our expert panel. Sorry, and I will start with Kira. Why don't you kick us off with an intro, Kira?
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Kira Cole. I am the CEO of KLB Consulting. We are an economic development consultancy, and we specialize in working with folks who are underserved in traditional industries, particularly in the economic development landscape, with a focus on tourism and hospitality. So thanks so much for having us, and I'm really excited to be here because I was also a municipal employee in the past and responsible for looking into how we could utilize platforms like Airbnb to support municipal accommodation taxes. So I'm really excited to have a further conversation about this.
Thanks, Kira. Really appreciate you being here. Pass it over to you, Aaron.
Hello, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. My name is Aaron Owalia, and I'm a recent graduate from Trent University. I'm a manager at Milano's Tandoori Grill, Ravi's favorite Indian restaurant. So we're right off of Pickering, right off of Highway 2 near Whites and Kingston Road. We started this business in 2016 as our friends enjoyed our food, home-cooked food, and we were pressured into opening up a restaurant as they loved our food and they wanted us to sell food to other people as they will enjoy our food, and they do too. So we
Thanks,
also
Aaron.
do, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done. Keep going.
Oh,
Sorry.
we also do live catering, and that's been a success ever since. And during summer period, everyone has enjoyed our live catering during the summertime. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Definitely anyone listening should check out Milano's. It's pretty delicious, as he said. And our last panelist, Joe. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Joe Baker. I run, similar to Kira, my own consultancy. We specialize in human capital in the hospitality, tourism, and education world. What does that mean? Well, ultimately, we focus on workforce development solutions, talent solutions, and we really work closely with both business operators, but also policymakers, industry associations, and we get to see firsthand the impact of the many different segments of the tourism industry and are big and strong advocates for the people of this industry. I also have a podcast. If you have a second, Google it. It's called No Reservation with Joe Baker. We're available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And that podcast is all about interviewing people who work in and around the tourism industry, talking about their career journeys and stories to really shed a light on some pretty incredible human beings. Excited to be here and talk to you today. I serve on a couple of boards of directors that are relevant to this topic. I'm on the board of directors for an organization called Tourism HR Canada. We are a national organization that designs, supports, and interventions for a healthy tourism industry workforce. And then I'm also on the board of an organization called Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning Canada, where we advocate for high quality, meaningful work integrated learning experiences for students in post-secondary education as they transition into the industry. So lots of different ways to approach the content today. Honored to be here with my fellow esteemed panelists. Looking forward to a great discussion.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it. Just to the audience, please put your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them at the end of the discussion, depending on time. So let's kick it off. Let's start with home, Canada. And I know Kira has some expertise in this area. So maybe this question, we start with you, Kira. How has the sharing economy improved rural tourism in Canada? Meaning, past Muskoka, Algonquin, those areas, those little towns in northern Ontario, or, in other provinces. Just thought, is there any trends or any ideas you have on how this has impacted positively or negatively tourism in Canada and rural areas?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. I'm happy that you clarified a little bit about the impact versus the improvement, because I think that we've seen ways in which the sharing economy has supported the tourism industry, particularly in rural areas where there's not the capacity or there's not the demand for large-scale hoteliers, where they need to grow a tourism economy that might be on a smaller scale. I see some really positive benefits in people being able to create experiential tourism offerings, really intimate, high yield, low impact, sustainable tourism product. But conversely, I've also seen some impacts on the principles of regenerative tourism. I think that there are some challenges with the disparity between who can, let's say, own an Airbnb. That folks who are working in the industry, have these platforms actually supported a differentiation or augmenting the labor crisis that we're seeing? And I'm not entirely certain that that has been the case. There are people who are still controlling the assets and people who are still working below living wage in the sharing economy. So I think that that's something we really need to look at. I think also it's really important to look at the ways in which the sharing economy has been reticent to expand into rural areas. So you see with Uber Eats, they might not exist in rural communities, which again makes it a lot less convenient for folks who are either from the city and used to using services like that, who rely on services like that for transportation in rural areas. One of the things that's particularly interesting to me is that there's a huge opportunity for rural communities to access the municipal accommodation tax through Airbnb and platforms such as VRBO. And so for those who aren't familiar with the municipal accommodation tax, it's a tax that is passed on to visitors to a community, 4% usually, and it is used to improve the tourism landscape in communities. What's really, really interesting about this is that the discretion of who Airbnb collects the municipal accommodation tax on behalf of is at the discretion of Airbnb. So cities like Toronto, like Ottawa, Airbnb will take on the responsibility of administering that municipal accommodation tax because it's worthwhile to them. When I was working in a rural community looking to implement a municipal accommodation tax and was trying to get a hold of Airbnb, we were told pretty straight up, you're too small for us. So that again creates this disparity between rural areas and large cities. In rural areas that really, really could use even that $50,000, $100,000 on an annual basis to make significant improvements to their tourism economy on an annual basis. So I think that we certainly cannot deny that there's been a huge impact on the tourism and hospitality landscape with the sharing economy. But I think the verdict's still out on whether or not that's net positive or net negative.
Okay, no, thanks for that. That's really insightful. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in there. Any thoughts on the question? No, all good. Maybe Aaron, I know we're talking about the effect on rural tourism. You manage a restaurant, family restaurant. Can you maybe sort of unpack for us the positive effects that the sharing economy, Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes have had? We'll start with positive and then move into something that more on the negative side, maybe. But let's start there.
Perfect. For the positive side, as you can see, they give us extra branches of revenue. Uber, Skip, the Dishes, DoorDash, they all give us separate branches of revenues. It's a really good thing that they added this, as it gives us like the pressure off of us for deliveries and all that. Because as if we do our deliveries ourselves, we don't have enough labor and staff because of COVID, and all the revenues have gone down ever since COVID had happened. And so what happened is that we had to decide whether we could do delivery by ourselves or whether to do it using third-party apps. And the ultimate decision was the third-party apps, and they have helped us ever since. The only bad things are that they have the margins. They charge us 30% on everything, on all our food products and every delivery. So it is hard for us to maintain these prices, as prices also increase in the stores too. Thanks.
Yeah. And Kira, just curious, going back to the rural question, are you finding restaurants further out of the cities leveraging like Skip and Uber Eats?
It really depends on what services are offered in their communities. I live in a community of about 30,000. Uber Eats isn't available in my community. Uber isn't available in my community. We have Skip the Dishes and we have DoorDash. So those companies I found have been a lot more open to working in more rural communities. And I still live in what would be considered sort of a small city. There are cities that are much more spread out where none of those services are available. So again, it's at this discretion of a private corporation on whether or not they're going to service rural communities. And it would be interesting to know, and I'm not quite sure the answer to this, if there are some like very rural, remote communities in maybe Northern Ontario that have successfully advocated for the addition of those sorts of services in their community to address some of those concerns. I'm not aware of any, and I'm not sure what the uptake would be from DoorDash, from Skip the Dishes. but having a strong maybe community advocate to bring some of those services in certainly could make an impact. If anybody else is familiar with anything that's happened like that, then that would be great. I know certainly. Oh, good, sure.
Thanks, Ravi. Sorry, can I just add some things here? So, yeah, I think we need to proceed with caution, and I think we need to proceed with our eyes and our ears open. Uber and Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes and Airbnb and all of the platforms designed for the shared economy are designed for the platform organizers and business owners to make money, right? They are profit-driven businesses. And so while the concept of the shared economy is interesting and something that's worth exploring and we'll continue to talk about, remember that the driving force behind it is these businesses coming in and putting themselves in the marketplace and making money. And so, actually in the middle of the pretty dark days of the pandemic, the owners of Uber and Uber Eats took a lot of heat because the individual small businesses were paying 25-30% on their sales. And, the CEO of Uber, was making millions and millions of dollars. I'm not against capitalism by any measure, but I just think let's be clear that the shared economy is driven by entrepreneurs who are trying to make money by facilitating the shared economy.
Yeah, no, great point. Exactly. Yes, they're in it for their shareholder value and their own personal value for sure. Just on that point, though, because you said they kind of started out as the underdogs, and now Uber, Airbnb, are as competitive as, and even Turo, as competitive as Hertz or other major hotel chains. We talked. Aaron was just giving us an example as a small business owner, how they're starting to work together with these type of companies like Skip and Uber Eats. Do you guys have any examples on how that's happened, let's say in the hotel space? Like how are hotels sort of leveraging the idea of Vrbo or Airbnb? Are we seeing any trends along those lines?
Can I
yeah, jump in
on a little? So, I think for the most, it's hard to articulate consensus in an industry as broad and diverse as the hotel industry in Canada, because in the hotel industry, you have the big, huge players like Marriott and Hilton that are big corporate entities. And then you have, thankfully, the individual, I own a trailer park or I own a motel. Like those people are all under that big accommodations umbrella. So it's hard to sort of speak on consensus on behalf of the industry. But I would say, that being said, certainly through some of the advocacy organizations, you see that the hotel industry is pretty displeased with Airbnb. They're pretty displeased with the shared economy in that they take their profession very seriously. And again, these are profit-driven businesses, whether they're independently owned or whether they're large corporations. And the shared economy has come in and really stolen a little bit of that market share. And maybe it's bigger in some places and lower in the other. And there's certainly lots of debate whether an Airbnb experience is anywhere close to the same as an experience if you're staying in a branded hotel property. But I think the hotels are not pleased with the Airbnb type platforms in general. Doesn't mean that they're going to fade away, but they're trying to engage as much as they possibly can. But they're also the ones that are making lots of noise saying we need more regulation and things like that. So to the point of the question and the point of this discussion, those platforms disrupted the regular order of business. And to some, that disruption was unwelcome.
Yeah.
First, I wanted to address one of the questions in the chat, Bonnie. When we're speaking of rural communities, it really depends on specific regulations. Usually, it would be communities with a population of under 20,000. Between 20 and 30,000 might be considered they're of a mid-sized community, but yeah, under 20,000. And just to echo off of what Joe was saying, one of the responses I've seen from the accommodation industry is the sort of explosion of the concept of a boutique hotel. But boutique accommodations, every room is different. People feel like they're getting personalized experiences, a huge commitment to the concepts of sustainability. And this is a direct response to a new type of visitor, people who are looking for something individual that feels custom to them, that feels like they're getting an experience. They're not getting the same room if they go from one floor to another, that they're getting an experience that's highly customized. You're seeing partnerships and communities where they're putting local products perhaps in accommodation so that people get a flavor of the community that they're staying. And I think that those are really resultant from a trend towards experiential travel, and experiential travel is really been embraced by the sharing economy. My dog just hopped up on the chair. Yeah, so I think that is one of the really distinct ways in which we're seeing the larger industry. Of course, one of the challenges that larger accommodation industry is facing is that they've had decades and decades and decades of regulation. And these new innovative platforms, the regulation is just catching up with them now. So there's a really huge disparity between mainstream or traditional accommodations and the sharing economy because the regulation hasn't caught up yet. And we've seen that in some of the challenges that have come out and the stumbling blocks and the stickiness of the industry and where the challenges lie. And regulators take time to catch up. And often also, not that I agree with this, but that the world is held together with red tape. So hoteliers have strictures. Yeah, I can credit my old boss who said that. But yeah, I think that they have different strictures and they have different regulations and they have different professional associations that mandate what they can and can't do, and that is very frustrating to an organization that's trying to compete with an unregulated or just beginning to be regulated industry. So it's quite complicated and nuanced.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And to kind of bring this all together, we're talking about regulation. Joe brought up the topic of, profitability and, the free market. So that's kind of really what it's about. And I think, let's just take Airbnb since we're on the topic of that. It is that has also started a sub economy, right? So there's been opportunists or entrepreneurs, if you want to, whatever you want to call them, that have started to become, I think, a few years ago, and especially in New York, just leasing or renting out properties and then becoming Airbnb hosts, professional hosts, right, and having this as a side income. I was reading some stories that some guys and people in college that would do this and make like $200K a year just on the side, renting, leasing these apartments out. And this has obviously had an effect on housing costs, rental costs, and they've started to change the regulations in the US. And I don't think anything like that's happened in Canada yet. I'm curious to open to the panel if you guys have any insights into that, but definitely, housing costs and rental costs are going up in Toronto, especially. Maybe we just start there. Do you guys foresee that, or first of all, we start with, do you think Airbnb is playing a factor or companies like that in rental prices in Toronto? And do you see regulations that will probably happen to avoid this, what's happening in New York?
Toronto just changed the regulations for Airbnbs last year, to my understanding, and they're pretty restrictive to address this. So when you think about it from a monetary perspective, of course, if you're in a major city, Toronto, you can get a hotel room on a weekend at $600 a night. If you're charging $3,000 a month in rent or $600, $400, $500 a day for an Airbnb, why would anybody rent for a month at a time when they can rent their apartment 3, 4, 5 days a month minimum and make the same amount? Which is why Toronto sort of took the next step. And so for those who aren't familiar with what happened in Toronto, you have to be able to rent your property for a minimum of 28 days. And if you're going to have an Airbnb, it has to be in the home that you live in, and not an alleyway apartment, not a basement apartment. It has to be in your actual home if you're going to rent it on a nightly basis. So that's really impacted folks who, let's say maybe 3 years ago, built a basement apartment to be able to rent that out as an Airbnb. They're no longer allowed to really do that. If they're going to rent it out more short term, they have to apply for a permit from the city. The city won't approve anything unless it is the house in which you live in. That opens up a host of interesting challenges from safety for not only the people who are living in those homes and renting, but the people who are visitors. It certainly addresses some of the concerns with housing prices. Now we have a lot of organizations, or not organizations, people who have built these Airbnbs and now have to sort of readjust what they're doing if they want to meet regulations, or it becomes sort of an underground market, which is even less regulated and more problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to thing there, Kira, there's also no way to police that. So, and the penalty for breaking the rules is so minor that if you were still, like, if you go on Airbnb right now and look for a place in Toronto, they're still all there. Very little has changed since those regulations have been put in place. And I think the same in a city like New York. You just said it. All that happens is, instead of being on the front cover of the, Airbnb website, it kind of gets spun in a different way. People will always find a way to subvert those regulations. I think, the question ultimately that you asked there, Ravi, is a platform like Airbnb, contributing to the affordable housing problem, in this country and in cities? And I think the answer to that question is yes, it is. I personally think it bears too much of the brunt of systemic issues that have gone unaddressed for a number of years, as in, collectively, we in this country have not taken care of the 40 million people who now, call Canada home, and those who are trying to call Canada home. Kira and I have worked together on some consulting projects, and the whole concept of a living wage in Canada, shockingly, is a new concept. But the living wage in this country, you could check out an organization called the Living Wage Network Canada. You can find them. They're a national nonprofit organization. They've done, analysis with community-based research to determine the hourly wage required for an individual to pay for their basic expenses.
Let me guess.
Wait,
$30 an hour.
Wait, for them to be able to engage in their community. That's basic. And they've studied 76 cities and regions across this country. And it ranges from anywhere, there are some that are kind of in the below $20 an hour range, and there are some that go all the way up to that $30 an hour. But the point of this whole thing is, in this country, the living wage cost is far above our minimum wage, and it's far above wages that can be earned, especially for people, taking entry-level jobs. Those could be people with their first jobs. Those could be new Canadians. There's a massive population of people who come to this country or who are already in this country who rely on those kinds of jobs for employment, and then find themselves in a situation where they cannot afford, a place to live. That's not really Airbnb's fault. It's been there for a long time. That's a problem that developed over, probably 50 years, exacerbated by the last few years and the recession and the interest rates going up. But yeah, we have a lot of work to do to take care of those kinds of problems. And I think the Airbnb situation and the shared economy, it's like leaning into a bruise,
I'd be interested to hear, Aaron, I know that there's a huge, the restaurant industry, for example, the profit margins aren't traditionally that high anyway. So what on an annual basis would a sharing economy cut into your bottom line? How is that massively disrupting the industry as a whole in terms of how you're able to run a business on an annual basis?
So we have to cut a lot of labor costs to cover up the cost of the expenses, like the revenue has gone down. So the rental expenses have actually gone up gradually, and the food costs have actually almost doubled. So it's been harder for us to maintain the food consistency, food quality. So over time, we've tried our best to find the best ways to maneuver past these things, and the best ways is when all the owners are there at the restaurant continuously to cover for these labor costs. So when these labor costs are covered, it's easier for us to cover the costs of all these other food expenses, rental expenses, and also the advertising expenses also. So that's what's helped us over time to at least maintain our level, to at least stay there for a couple of years. Soon the revenues will go up, obviously, as COVID opens up more, but maybe in the future we'll see what goes on. Thanks for the question. It was a really good question.
Yeah, thanks, Kira. A follow-up question for you, Aaron. I think there was an article the other day saying that Toronto restaurants have seen a dip for the last quarter or a few quarters in restaurant sales. I don't know if you read that article. I was wondering, have you seen? So I wasn't sure if it was just like in restaurant dining or overall sales, and just wondering, like, if you can comment on that piece of data.
So I haven't read the newsletter, but I can give you an idea of what it is. So usually in this past quarter, it's always the slowest in the whole year. Usually from April to June, it's when we are at our busiest. But when it comes to summertime, like July, August, September, is when the sales dip down. This is because all the people are going for vacation and all. So when they go for vacation, obviously we're going to get less customers. And usually the dine-in people, they don't usually come out anymore, as for I'm told. I ask everyone around, they all ask, oh, have you seen any dine-in people? They usually give a comment, oh yeah, we don't go out for dine-in ourselves anymore. We just take takeout and just go home and eat. So what I've noticed is ever since COVID has happened, people have stopped going out as much. People use the third-party apps to order, like online products. They actually order grocery now on Uber. So they save time and they stay home. So they don't go out as much. So that's probably why the revenues have gone down in Toronto. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. No, I was wondering if, the Skip the Dishes and the Uber Eats and things like that have really started to, restaurants no longer need a storefront. It's just really, you're cooking in the back and providing, you have a relationship with Skip the Dishes and just providing takeout. Seems like a pretty good, cheaper, more efficient business model.
Can I add something there, Ravi?
100%.
Aaron, good points. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I think there's another side of what you just said. So the interesting thing, you're sort of saying your profit margins at the best of times are fairly lean in the restaurant industry specifically. Some people kind of say that anywhere from 5 to 10% if you're doing a good job. That doesn't leave very much room for unforeseen expenses. And when you drop a business model like Uber or Skip or whoever they are that charge those business owners 25 or 30% markup on top of that, that adds a lot of pressure. It sort of diverts profit from the independent businesses to the Uber people. So the independent businesses say, yeah, is the additional revenue welcomed? Of course it is. But does the additional revenue from Uber and Skip the Dishes and those kinds of things actually contribute to overall profitability in the restaurant sector? I think the jury's still out on that. And I think that some people have figured it out and some people haven't. You just said the disruption of the business model, the kind of emergence, it was a bit, it was sort of a trendy thing. It's gone away from the media headlines, but it hasn't gone away from the business, which are these ghost kitchens. And exactly what you just said. Why have a kitchen or a restaurant facility in a high traffic, high rent space when you can take it to a lower rent, more industrial space that doesn't have a storefront, crank out the volume of food, use the delivery apps, and make all the money. That's the impact, the evolution of the business model. But the one thing that Aaron said that always kind of makes me concerned is, yeah, so we've had to cut the labor in order to, use these services. So cutting the labor makes sense from an operator perspective because you're lowering your costs. But what does it do for the people who relied on those businesses for employment? Cutting the labor means Aaron's not bringing as many staff to work. So what happens to the rest of those staff? Just keep in mind, across this country, there are about 2 million people who work in the tourism industry collectively. And in the restaurant food service sector, there's almost 1 million people. That's almost half of the entire tourism industry workforce that work in food and beverage. So what happens when we start cutting labor across the board for a number of reasons? It's really challenging from a people employment perspective, and it just kind of makes situations, even more tense. And for the most part, what it starts to do is it drives people away from working in our industry. Why would I work in a restaurant when the work is precarious, when at the very least I could work at Amazon, I can start at $25 an hour, I get immediate access to benefits, and I get, mental health breaks. And so sometimes you got to look at the big picture. When you see these disruptions and you see the technology coming in and, creating a new market segment, what are the ripple effects?
If I could add to what Joe's saying, and to what Aaron was saying earlier, is that he's working more to offset the costs of the profit that he's losing just to make the same amount. So what is that saying about the quality of life, the quality of work, the quality of family time, of work-life balance for business owners in this industry? Maybe 5-10 years ago, he would have been able to, let's say, have a vacation before the sharing economy, and now he's working harder to make the same amount of money. And I mean, not only talking about the lack of ability to bring people on, but that means that there's an undue burden on the people that are opening businesses, and they're looking at a different quality of life than they would have 10-15 years ago. Is that stopping people from opening businesses in this industry because they have to work? There's not an ability right now, or it's difficult to work smarter and not harder because of things like the sharing economy, which again, as Joe mentioned earlier, the people who are making money off of the sharing economy aren't the business owners. They're not the delivery drivers. It's the corporation that is driving this new way of living.
Yeah, no, good points. I think, I think when those people work for Uber now for $15 an hour, right? So guys and gals, tip your Uber delivery guy or driver the next time you're out there, because they're working for nothing. But, on the flip side of that, I went up for a trip up north. I do it a couple times a year with my kids. And, I took my car, but I could have done a Turo car. And I did an Airbnb, stayed with a lady that rented out her beautiful cottage on a lake. We're at Bass Lake. And, in her living room, she had all the brochures of people renting out paddle boats and canoes. And, those are all different businesses that are surviving on that. And they all have different platforms, not really sharing, but still, it seems to me like they're a supportive economy that's growing out of this, and they're all entrepreneurs themselves too, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there is some positive, but I definitely hear what you guys are saying on the other side. But I do feel, it does spring up some other opportunities for entrepreneurs, especially in those areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when it's done right. I think that, I'm an avid user of sharing platforms. I'm a typical elder millennial. If I don't have to talk to somebody on the phone, I don't have to stay with other guests. I get an intimate experience that feels custom to me. That's an alternative accommodation. Like, I love that stuff. And I take a lot of time to make sure that I'm staying in the places that don't feel sterile, that don't feel or that look or that are recommended by the local destination marketing organizations. But I also think that that comes from some privilege of knowing the industry a little bit more. So certainly there are people who understand the hospitality industry, but that's not a mandate. That's not something that's offered as training. These are entrepreneurs who understand community economic development, who understand community building, who understand what their visitors want and have a good understanding of the expectations of travelers nowadays. And that's fantastic. I think that that's a really amazing thing. And like I said, that's why I choose to stay often in non-traditional spaces. But there's no consistency across the board for that. So it's really interesting to see who does well and who doesn't, and who embraces their community and opportunity for partnership development. And I think that those are some of the question marks that come out of something like this.
Yeah, and I don't think Uber Eats, or I don't think that all of the share economy digital platforms are universally bad at all. And I think you're right. I think they have enabled more entrepreneurialism, which I think is a good thing. I think it's just something that we need to monitor. Again, I think capitalism is okay as long as it comes with consciousness. And I think conscious capitalism just means we should check in once in a while to make sure we're bringing people along with us, right? I think it goes back down to this, distribution of wealth. Again, nothing wrong with people doing really well and creating wealth, but are we also creating the capacity for as many people as possible to create wealth, or are people creating wealth at the expense of others? And I just shared a link there. Uber Eats generated $10 billion of revenue in 2022. That's pretty significant.
Globally?
Let's check the other side of the ledger and just make sure that the business owners who prop up Uber Eats are also making profits, to Kira's point, so they can take vacations, so they can pay their staff, so they can put food on their table. That's all, right? Everybody needs to come along in the success. And usually it isn't the business owners or the entrepreneurs who are able to keep an eye on that. That responsibility tends to fall to our government, and that's why we have a government, and that's why we have so much intervention. It's let's just make sure that everybody's coming along for the ride when we create success and wealth, and not that we're exploiting people to create wealth for a few people.
I love it. Joe Baker for Prime Minister. It's got a good ring to it.
I'd vote for you, Joe.
Forget it. I swear too much. I can't control myself. It's difficult.
I'm swearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the Prepr, 5-second delay right there, everybody. Just so.
No, but I mean, what you're saying is super important. I know that's, more of a political conversation, but definitely we're all feeling it, right? I think, that's what's happening right now. I feel like what happened in France with the retirement age and the riots they had there, that's all to get people getting squeezed economically. And just to add to this, we did the last webinar was actually on autonomous robot delivery. And we were exploring startups that are, trying to break in and figure this out of how you can get your burritos delivered by a robot, right? I mean, that's an extreme application. I think it's happening in San Francisco, but in Canada, these robots are doing it in hospitals and things like that. And, that's part of that question too, right? That's going to autonomous driving soon. Like you won't need Uber drivers, right? So, it's a whole other conversation, but it's an interesting topic to explore.
No, and I think it's very relevant, because even if you just think about traditional hospitality and tourism-based businesses, so we're talking about Airbnb, we're talking about Uber. So let's just talk about a hotel and a restaurant. Pre-technology, and I'm not talking about like the abacus, I'm just talking about exponential technology. You made a reservation. You might have even picked up your phone and called a number, a 1-800 number, to make a reservation, looked in the yellow pages to find the phone number. You called the hotel, you made a reservation, right? You walked in, there was a person who greeted you at the front door. There was a person who greeted you at the front desk. You checked in, Mr. Baker, we have your, queen size bed with, extra, whatever, towels. Somebody carried your bags up. You went in. You knew you got housekeeping service every day, so you made sure that you made as much mess as you possibly could, because we're all just our inner children wanting to be, messy and jump up and down in the bed. You tipped your housekeeper. You tipped the bell person. You walked out the door. You picked up your car from the valet. Think about the number of human beings involved in that interaction, right? And technology, even if we aren't talking about shared economy, but that absolutely adds to it. You book your reservation on your app, you walk in, it's self check-in, you get a mobile key, you go to your room, there isn't going to be housekeeping, right? They don't even have restaurants in your hotel anymore. They have like mini bars that's really expensive and some food you can grab at the front desk. You may see one person working for that hotel company when you check out. All that we're saying, and if you do Airbnb and you look at those things, there might even be no people. All that we're saying is the innovation in these platforms, the innovation in the technology has disrupted the industry. And what are the implications for everybody who otherwise relied on the industry as a matter of employment? That's my angle on this. I'm all for growth and change and evolution and profitability, but what are the impacts? And who are the people who have been impacted? Are they the people who were doing okay and they're resilient and they can quickly move somewhere else? Or were the people who were impacted because of all this technology, people who might need a helping hand to figure out where to go next from a career perspective?
I think it's important as well to look at who are the folks in the industry that are being disproportionately disadvantaged. Let's look at restaurants, for example, that are so one of my clients that I work with, they are an agri-innovation company, and their purpose is to grow Afro-Caribbean foods, because growing Afro-Caribbean foods in Canada reduces the cost of those foods by 80%. So tariffs, food import costs for restaurants that are owned by new immigrants or restaurants that are owned by people who are coming from other countries where there are high tariffs that we know are often systemically racist or systemically problematic. Those are the businesses that are losing the most money, because they're the ones that are already facing higher cost to purchase products or low stock of products, let's say. So to give a good example, like an Afro-Caribbean restaurant, there are certain vegetables that you can only get from certain countries, despite the fact that they might be grown all over South America, the Caribbean, or Africa. But it can only, let's say, be imported from Nigeria because of specific tariffs, which are political. So I think, like, really, when we really drill down into it and look at things intersectionally as well, the people that are being impacted the most by a lot of these regulatory changes, by sharing economies, are people of color, are new immigrants, are people who are coming here or have been in the country and are looking to create a sense of community with people who are living here or share culture. And I think that that's really important to look at, is who's being disproportionately disadvantaged by these sorts of systems.
Yeah,
and that's my soapbox.
Yeah, good soapbox.
Great point. Great point.
And then the point is, with all of that extra money that we've come up with and all of that talent that we now have, let's figure out other ways to help those people find their way to prosperity and success, right? Let's not just forget about them. Let's not just abandon them. I think that's part of this, right? Kind of what I was saying, how we pull people along with us. Wow, we've created this new successful business model. Perfect. Has anybody been displaced? Yep. There they are over there. Let's give them a helping hand and make sure that they can find their way to where they need to be.
Yeah. No, it's a big, really interesting topic. And, at Prepr, that's part of what we really do, is to help new Canadians sort of find a career path that is, fruitful. And you're not coming here with an engineering degree driving in an Uber cab, right? And that's happening a lot. We bring in a lot, Kira mentioned it off the top. In hospitality, I mean, in Banff and places like that, there's a labor crisis, right? They just can't find people to do the jobs, right? And I think this kind of drives some of the things that you were talking about, Joe, as far as minimalism in hotels and, one person doing everything, right? Just go to the dollar store. There's one person managing the entire dollar store. It's all automated, cash outs, right? Those jobs are all gone. That's not even that again goes back to robotics. But again, another topic for another time, because that's a big fuzzy hairy one. But circling back to what you mentioned before, all of you, around the customer experience, and the question here is more about has it been a positive effect? I think so, on the overall customer experience. But Joe, in your story, when you're talking about, I kind of miss the days of just calling, getting that hotel service, the bellman, and picking up my bags and taking it. But on the other hand, sometimes I kind of think I just like getting the keys to the house and going in and having it to myself. But just interested in how you guys perceive it as. Has it been like, what have been the improvements to the overall customer experience that the peer-to-peer sort of revolution have caused from a customer perspective?
For me, it is, honestly, my time is limited. I have the ability to do things on my own timelines. If I don't want to interact with people, I don't have to. For me, that is a positive customer experience. There's minimal disruption to my day. I think we've all had amazing customer service, interpersonal, that has made our vacation. That has, I still remember some trips that I've gone on, and I remember the bartender at the pool that I attended in 10, 15 years ago, because he was so great. But we've also had crappy customer experience. And I think not having to deal with people, and sometimes that is fundamental for me. If I'm traveling a 12-hour day to get to a location, and then I go to check in, and I'm met with a lot of resistance, that's problematic for me. I love the opportunity to, like you said, when you go to an Airbnb and I get to see who's doing what in the community, what are the locals doing, what are the local businesses that I can support. For me, that's, I don't want to go to a chain restaurant. I don't want to go to things that are not unique to that location. I want to leave the location better than when I got there. And I think that we see a lot of travelers who are really committed to that sort of philosophy. So I think that the sharing economy has given you an opportunity to not just let's say, and I'm not knocking the traditional hotel industry, but how many times have we open up the booklet, and it's just Boston Pizza and Pizza and all the places that are the chain restaurants, where when I go to an Airbnb, I can see, John and Maria down the street own a fruit stand, and they grow their produce next to their kids that have been growing this for 50 years. And that for me feels like an enriching experience. And I think that that's really beautiful, and something that a lot of people are looking for. But again, it's not universal. And it's really dependent on the business owner and how much they understand visitor experience and customer satisfaction. And I think the mainstream hotel industries had a lot longer to take those courses, or I don't want to say entrench, but train their staff on how to deliver exceptional customer experience. And we don't always see that with some of the smaller Airbnbs.
Yeah, thanks, Kira. Joe, Aaron?
Aaron, you want to go? I feel like Kira and I are pretty good talkers, and we make space for you to share your perspective too.
For sure, yeah. I just want to down on Kira. Kira had a great point about customer experiences and how the bartender treated her well 10, 15 years ago. So just wanted to add for myself. So when I was on a cruise in 2019, the customer experience is what makes your day and makes your week, or even a month, or even a year. When you work so hard for at least 9 to 10 months and want to go on vacation for a few weeks, customer experience helps you enjoy the vacation more, and that you feel that you've earned your vacation properly. So at the restaurant, we ourselves, we have to give that customer experience. And of course, we like to do it. We got a call from some company. They said, "Oh, did you want to do some automated POS machines?" We denied it, because we want to give that customer experience to the dine-in customers, to the takeout customers, phone ordered customers, because that's what matters. So the customer experience is what makes someone's day. If someone was disappointed with the food, you got to give that customer experience. If you're going to do it on an automated robot, then there's no way you're going to get that customer experience back to get your day back or day earned from a loss of 5 to 10 seconds due to like a mistake of an order that they received. So customer experience is what actually drives the industries, like the tourism industry. So like how Ravi said for Airbnbs. So for Airbnbs, it's totally different from how hotels used to be. Hotels, they used to have that customer experience where they had the bell service representative, the front service representative, the housekeeper. Airbnbs, it'll just be automated. So on the phone, you only have one checkout. You just check in and check out as per the time given. For an Airbnb, you're not going to enjoy that experience as much as you would at a hotel like 10, 15 years ago, as per what Joe said. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, and just quickly, Ravi, when things are going well, we love the technology. When things don't go well, when we have a problem, we hate the technology. Who do I call when that pipe bursts in that beautiful Airbnb con? Oh, you call nobody. What if I'm not feeling secure? What if one of the neighbors is really creeping me out? What if I have a disability and need additional support? Right? When things are going really well, we love the technology. It's smooth, it's efficient. I share both of your same traits. I'd rather talk to nobody when I check into a hotel, 0 people. But if something went wrong, or if something went wrong with somebody that I cared about, or something went wrong with a really important client of mine, and there isn't somebody to step in to immediately handle things with that, Aaron knows it, that amazing hospitality spirit. We got this. No matter what, the whole kitchen's on fire. We got it under control. We will take care of you. Don't worry about it, right? That's the thing and that's what we have to figure out, right? How do we blend the technology and the people so that when things are going well, we're leveraging the technology, and when they're not going well, we are creating those service moments of truth where we remind those guests and clients why we are professionals and why we do what we do. And I think, that's the blend, that's the balance.
Thanks, Joe. I think we got our challenge statement there. How do we blend technology and people to increase the customer service? Obviously, leveraging the platforms and the technology to increase customer service. So at least that's one challenge statement that I think came out of the discussion. We have a couple minutes here left, guys. I don't know if you guys have any final comments. I'll kind of break this open a bit. But for me, yeah, I definitely hear you. The conversation around labor, housing crisis, affordability, really helping to propel, individuals with their careers as things as technology really competes for jobs, right? Really competing against technology for jobs. How do we solve that? So definitely, there's a lot of challenges there, but I do see some positive things. I definitely one of the things that came to my attention was we did this webinar on food earlier, and there's this great app that we found called Shared Earth, which I think I mentioned it earlier. You've got a piece of land, you can rent it out, share it, and share the price of the produce. Those are positive things. I like to use power tools, but I don't have a certain power tool. There's a sharing platform for power tools. You want to drill or a specific type of drill, you don't have to buy it. You can go and share it. So there's a lot of positivities there, I think, that are also part of this. And interested to know just, what you guys see just as a wrap up as far as the future holds for sharing economies.
I think that the one question that I want to leave everybody with, and it's sort of a high level question, is what are the principles of regenerative tourism? What are the principles of regenerative economies? And I don't think that the sharing economy nor the traditional hospitality industry has fully embraced and or implemented regenerative principles in a way that is really meaningful on a broad level. So are we aligning with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals? What is the overall impact of the hospitality industry on people? And can we see hospitality and tourism as a force for good so that we aren't sitting here in 10 years having conversations about a disparity between workers, of quality of life, of housing affordability. I think that those are the principles that are really important, and sort of the bottom line to all of these conversations is that we have an opportunity as an industry to look at a regenerative economy, and none of us have quite done it right yet, but we should be exploring those questions, whether or not we are a platform like Airbnb, Uber, Turo, or we are a traditional hotelier like Hilton, or a boutique hotel, or a small independently owned business. And I think that until we start looking at that question as sort of our driving force for why we're doing business, that these questions will continue to come up. So I think that that's sort of my challenge to everybody, is to underscore the importance of regenerative practices in the business environment.
Love it. Fantastic. Joe, I'll give you the last word before we wrap up.
Yeah, well said, Kira. And regenerative practices also means that we are taking care of the people who rely on our industries to create wealth and well-being for themselves, for their families. The shared economy isn't going anywhere anytime soon. The integration of technology into our lives and businesses is only going to continue to grow exponentially in ways that we can't even wrap our heads around. And what I think we should continue to hold on to is a sense of community. I think we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of the people around us, because if 1% of us ends up holding all the money and all the resources at the expense of the other 99%, and those aliens fly in and say, all right, humanity, teach us what you've done, we won't be very proud of ourselves. We really got to take care of ourselves, our families, and our friends, and our neighbors, and our communities. We can be competitors, but we can also actually care. So that's my statement.
Amazing. Really great discussion, guys. Maybe Aaron can invite us to his restaurant so we can meet in person. And
wait, Aaron, his closing thoughts.
For sure, Aaron.
Yeah. I'll take care of you guys.
Yeah, Aaron, I think, we started off with the younger generation, and you are that. If you have, to Joe's point, do you have any final thoughts on your sort of perspective and your generation perspective on sharing? What I said at the beginning, was that true, or do you feel it's true that, your generation care more about reputation, health, happiness versus what you own?
Yeah, I agree. We need to care about that more.
Yeah. All right. Perfect,
sure.
guys. Well, on that note, really appreciate you guys joining us. Very insightful and positive conversation. A lot of different topics here that I think would make great challenge statements. So I'd like to thank Aaron, Kira, and Joe. Thanks again, guys. And I'd like to thank Jenny Law and Sana Ali, our production and marketing team, and our audience. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.